Welcome. My name is Shauna Lee. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Social Work, and we're here today with Quanna Fish and Greg Hoffman, who will introduce themselves in a few minutes, talking about the process of developing a logic model for a community-based program called Young Fathers Standing United. So would you like to introduce yourself?
How are you? Like you mentioned, I'm Quanna Fish. I'm founder and president of Young Fathers Standing United. I'm a 41-year-old dad, Detroit native, and I'm very passionate about helping at-risk young dads.
I'm Greg Hoffman. I'm a researcher in the School of Social Work, working on a couple projects, including the community-based participatory research project that is how we met, or how I met Quan.
So basically we're here working with Quan to help him in the process of developing a logic model for Young Fathers Standing United. And the goal of our work today is to actually do the logic model, but also talk through the process of developing a logic model and do it from the perspective of a social work practitioner out there in the community who does this kind of work and needs to develop a logic model to give to potential consumers of the product, in this case the workshops, but also for grant funders. So our goal will be to highlight some of the key aspects of developing a logic model and illustrate that process through our work with Quan. Young Fathers Standing United is a program that does a lot of different things, but we're focusing specifically on a workshop Quan is developing for a high school in Detroit. So this is going to be a little bit more narrowly focused on what that workshop is going to look like. And we're going to start with this basic logic model that focuses on inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impact. Now we're just going to start with long and short-term outcomes, and so maybe Quan, you could tell us what you think some of those long and short-term outcomes should be.
So long-term outcomes, we want to stabilize that financially. We want to increase his parenting skills. / fathering skills.
Okay.
We wanted to see an increase in his children's
Well-being?
well-being.
Okay.
And I guess that would be an increase as far as educational-wise. I mean, it affects a lot of different areas according to studies. So I guess increase the well-being covers it all, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's best to just identify a few key outcomes.
Okay.
And usually when I think about outcomes, I think about things that are really measurable.
Okay.
So actually, I would say two things. Long-term outcomes, I think it's okay to be really broad. And just, what do you hope your long-term impact? Some people will call that an impact statement. Some people call it long-term outcomes. I think it's kind of the same. But what this usually refers to is sort of a projected, maybe something you can't really measure right now, but if you were in an ideal world and had lots of resources, it would be the thing that you would, measure someday.
Right.
Whereas the short-term outcomes might be those specific measurable units that you assess in your pre- and post-test surveys.
Okay.
So stabilizing communities and households by promoting positive fatherhood. I think, and then another long-term outcome is, of course, to increase child well-being.
Developing.
By developing
fatherhood skills or principles.
Fatherhood capacity. Is that too too vague?
Increasing fatherhood knowledge, parenting knowledge.
Increasing fatherhood
Skills.
engagement.
We're increasing dad's awareness and self-concept.
So would you think of that as being more short-term or long-term?
I guess that would be more short-term.
Yeah, I think based on some of the conversations we've already had that the students haven't heard about, but increasing, sort of, we might use the term self-efficacy or awareness or
Okay.
well-being.
What does self-awareness mean in this case? Well,
Okay.
they're able to identify, like you were talking about earlier, some of the stereotypes that they're facing.
Yeah, and that's a measurable thing.
Right, being
Yeah,
able
that's
to
a big
identify
thing.
3 stereotypes
So-
that they want to counter, right? That they want to break against those stereotypes.
Yes.
Would be more of like a,
Breaking the cycle.
yeah.
So identifying so I think that's kind of important. What Greg is doing is trying to break it down. So on the logic model, it's this broad category called self-awareness. You might, in the workshop itself, talk about identifying stereotypes about young urban African Americans and the statistics that you mentioned around
Statistical patterns, negative statistical patterns.
the negative statistical patterns. And the way you'll measure that then is maybe having them identify some specific stereotypes that they would like to counter or overcome. Yeah. So I kind of like that idea. So I think that fits really well there as a short-term outcome. I would probably think about moving this parenting skills down here because to me some of the components of the workshop do focus on explicit skills.
Yes.
So I would put parenting skills as a short-term outcome. Then do we have maybe like a third thing that might be a third short-term outcome? So something explicit, measurable, very in that post-test survey at the end of the workshop, you're going to ask them about parenting skills. You're going to ask about stereotypes and have them identify those stereotypes. What would be another outcome you might want to measure?
Communication and relationship
Okay.
skills.
Great. Communication and relationship skills.
Is that, yeah, and that's probably not just with the child, right? That's,
Right. Just having a good importance of having that good relationship
Okay.
with the mom and I. That's
So,
key.
mom and baby. And I think that's good. We can revisit this later and change it and modify it, but to me, 3 outcomes, short-term outcomes, is more than enough
Okay.
to start with. Because you don't want to have so many outcomes that you can't really measure them. Yeah. One key
Yeah.
output is the pre and post-test survey.
Mhm.
So that's like the measure of. So what are some other outputs you would hope to
So the workbook that we
workbook?
you know,
Do you want to say a little more about the workbook?
well, the way they have it, I guess the fathers are working on it during the program,
Mhm.
and for homework, and they can refer to it after the program, like they get to keep it.
so that's kind of
to
their
reference.
takeaway resource,
Yeah.
is the workbook. Okay, so that's one that's gonna probably go in a couple of categories.
Yeah.
The completed workbook in the output, the work through that workbook as the activity.
It's an activity, yeah. So the workbook is pretty important because it's going to include homework, but it's also going to be like short activities, writing things down during each session.
Okay.
So I'm just going to write that down as 2 things. So
Okay.
homework, but also
So we're
worksheets during which identify skills or test knowledge or just
Information.
they link to the activities. All right, so worksheets during each session as well as homework. So in the end, you hope they have a completed workbook, but at each session, they'll have completed specific
Okay.
worksheets. Any other outputs that
an idea of how many people you want in the program? Of like,
Well, you know what? I wanted to run kind of like small groups of no more than 12.
so the output is that pilot group, the 12 men completing the program.
Yep, they complete the program. Part of what we have to figure out today is how many sessions. So we know we have the Real Care Baby and we have the 24/7 Dad curriculum and your adaptations of that. But what are how many sessions? Like, think about this is the context of a high school. It's a pilot program, 12 guys for about an hour. I don't think you can count on having them for much more than an hour, probably.
Yeah.
How many sessions do you want to do? Let's start with 4.
Okay.
So we'll say 4 sessions is sort of the main 4 in-person sessions with this group of 12 young men.
Okay.
When we discussed it a little bit earlier, you're talking about leading with the expectation versus the reality,
Okay.
right? So you talked about how I think that's going to be a really powerful opening for you to build rapport with the members, to the participants of, until I saw this stuff, I didn't realize I was following that same
That's right.
path. And so that also matches up with one of the outcomes of being able to kind of name some of those stereotypes and identify those. So starting with that, and then you almost establish a filter for them to really view, a lot of the stuff that follows.
Yeah, I agree.
Of expectation versus reality.
So you'll kind of start with your story, essentially. We'll call this Quan's story. But it's your story, but it's through the eyes of the research.
One, and then how about the second session, Quan?
Okay. The second session, what did I have on here? So that's where the manhood and fatherhood piece comes in.
Okay. And fatherhood.
Yeah. Guess that that can cover that would go into the the characteristics and
The parent roles that you discussed.
and the responsibility piece.
Parenting roles. Okay.
Okay.
Responsibilities. Why don't we do child safety and care as week 3? Child care and safety.
Maybe incorporating the Real Care Baby.
Yep, this will be the Real Care Baby Day.
So then they've got the kind of foundation from classes 1 and 2, application in class 3.
And then 4 could be the co-parenting piece, like how you want to deal with communication and co-parenting. And
Co-parenting.
this is, I think, just why it's so important ahead of time to do this curriculum planning that we can do at another time.
Okay.
Because you do want to make sure you can get to those outcomes. And to
Gotcha.
get to those outcomes, there are going to be things you're not going to be able to talk about.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Because you're going to want to zero in on what are the 3 measurable things. You want to show some shift in relationship skills or communication skills, baby skills, and attitudes and awareness about fatherhood, stereotypes. So let's talk about inputs. I think that's our last category for today. Inputs.
Okay. So the input we know is going to be, I guess, our 4-week curriculum.
Facilitator,
Yeah.
curriculum, workbook.
And the school itself, right, would be a part of the resource there. Is the facility they're going to provide, at least for the pilot, ideally, they're going to be providing space.
Well, the other resources that we have, I guess we can't put them on there.
Like
Because
what?
we had the jobs, we had, we got the friend of the court help. And we have, but those are like,
Well, a
It's
resource
not-
guide, right?
or just say community partnerships. How about
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
that? Okay.
Maybe you can maybe you can work some of that into the workbook. It's just resources.
Okay.
Community partnerships, I think U of M, SSW, evaluation. Oops. We're doing, we're probably going to develop the pre and post test measures, I mean, with you, but, you know, we'll probably help with the evaluation, data analysis, measures.
The way that Shauna organized it, someone also is like materials for, or, you know, in the class,
Yeah.
the physical space, and then kind of the human capital component,
Human capital.
which are those relationships that you have that
Yeah.
you can, you know, leverage for this.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking.
Money, I mean, the school's also gonna be providing some Title, what is it,
Title
Title I funding.
And are you gonna need any other kind of, at least in the pilot, is it just you and then the 12 students? Because obviously the students need to be put into the,
Yeah, we have the Real Care Baby and the 24/7 Dad curriculum that need to be added, as well as students, right? The students, so the individuals who are participants. Well, I think this is good for now.
Okay.
Facilitators, possibly a co-facilitator. Curriculum that you're developing, which is based on the Real Care Baby and 24/7 Dad, but it's sort of your take on it.
Okay.
Workbook and materials that you're going to develop, but also some other materials that are probably already out there. The school, which is the facility and the space, but also the students and participants. Title I funding from the school to pay for some of these things. Community partnerships, which exactly has to be, kind of has to be determined exactly what role they're going to play.
Okay.
And then U of M School Social Work, which is doing evaluation, data analysis, helping with measures development, etc.